Good afternoon. My name is Antron Watson. I'm with AARP Massachusetts. I'm the Age Friendly Director here. So I just want to thank you all for joining us today for our Livable Wednesday series that highlights the variety of ways volunteers, organizations, and municipalities across Massachusetts are paying increased attention to the environmental, economic, and social factors that influence the health and well-being of people as they age. If you have questions throughout the presentation today, please use the Q&A feature. My partner will make sure we get to them, get those questions and comments answered for you as we go along throughout the presentation. So as you may already know, AARP has been working to promote the health and well-being of older Americans for more than 60 years through information, advocacy, and resources. Part of that includes helping to improve the places we live so we can all thrive, regardless of age, ability, or background. We all want to live in a place where there are transportation options, housing is affordable and works for our needs as we age, there is access to outdoors, and there are ways to stay connected with loved ones and neighbors. Ultimately, our vision is for a future in which communities, urban, suburban, and rural, are great places for all, especially people 50 plus. Today, I'm pleased to talk about community gardens, the rise of the local food movement, along with growing understanding of the economic benefits of vibrant public spaces, has helped alert developers and urban planners to the value community gardens have as desirable gathering places. I'm honored to be joined by an organization who is actively working to transform the city landscapes and build community. So as a reminder, just want to let you know, use the Q&A for questions and or chat. But now I'd like to introduce my special guest, Peter Bound, the trustees. Welcome and thank you for being here today, Peter.
Hey, great. Thanks for having me. Sorry for the casualness of all this. We are away and under a little construction. So if you hear some jackhammering, just let me know.
Perfect.
We're doing there's some concrete restoration happening on a bad schedule for this.
Awesome. No worries. Well, Peter, thank you again for being here. Honestly, I think I've said enough in the beginning, so I'm going to turn it over to you and we'll go from there.
Sure, thanks. And for everybody sort of watching and listening in, I would be more than happy to sort of answer questions rather than blather on for this entire time. So please, don't be shy about putting stuff in the chat already. Okay, so where should I start? So I work for an outfit called the Trustees of Reservations. We've got a couple of slides about it that Antron can throw up. But basically, we are the oldest we're a Massachusetts-based and bordered land conservation organization. We have been around for something north of 100 years. And we have approximately, and it changes every week and every year, 126 sites, properties across the state of Massachusetts. They range from everything to working farms, to historic homes, to community gardens, which is my piece, and also to, we are the largest private owner of coastline in the state of Massachusetts. So we've got quite a full plate. What you're seeing now is we've got some farming in the lower right-hand corner. Upper right is a property called the Bradley Estate, which is in Canton, Massachusetts. It is 90 acres and was gifted to us at the death of the last surviving family member. It is, for local folks, it is right across the highway from the Blue Hills ski area, and is clearly has lovely formal gardens, and we use it for not only for sort of quiet enjoyment and hiking trails, but also it's a wedding venue because, quite frankly, these places all cost money to maintain, and we need to very often come up with revenue streams for these lovely spots. That roof's not cheap that we're looking at right there. Anyway, so 120 plus properties, and my particular piece of the trustees is that I work for the group called Boston Community Gardeners. Who are we? We are 4 or 5 of us in this pretty large organization who sort of run, who are in charge of the 56 gardens. We are the largest owner of community gardens in the city of Boston. We have been around while the trustees have been around for all this time. The way that the community gardens in Boston's originated was mostly through guerrilla gardening. There were 7 neighborhood nonprofits where folks and neighbors basically started cutting through chain link fences, moving rubble, and planting things. Over time, the city came to acknowledge the value of these efforts, and we now have all of these places permanently protected as active open space, as for the purpose of community gardening. That's amazing. It only took, what, 40, 50 years, but we're there now. We are actively looking to increase, to add to the number of gardens that we have in the city of Boston, but it's tough. Land is there's not a lot of empty land, and we are always talking about balancing the needs of communities when a piece of land is in the disposition process. Housing is an issue, open space is an issue, food access is an issue. So that's a very quick version of this. My personal background is I arrived in Boston in 1986 and became a community gardener in the South End neighborhood, and we had a little land trust, as was common with small nonprofits. In those days, land trusts fail, nonprofits fail. And so over time, there were 7 or 8 significant little land trusts in Boston. They were dissolved and were absorbed by a larger citywide organization, the Boston Natural Areas Network, and then they closed shop, and now everything is under the umbrella of the trustees. So the beauty of the trustees is that they are an enormously stable organization, and they're not going to go anywhere. So we're in a good spot. So our gardens are in 8 different neighborhoods in the city. They range from small 12-plot gardens to, I think our largest one is 159 plots and takes up an entire city block. We are, the neighborhood that I have worked in, mostly in the South End and Lower Roxbury, the gardens were very significant public green spaces, not only for food access and teaching kids about sort of healthy food and how things grow and science and where stuff comes from, but also that just community building. So we do everything from sort of open garden days to sort of potlucks to entertainment, to not only bring the gardeners together, but also bring the entire sort of immediate neighborhood together. What else would you guys like to know? We talk about food access a lot. We talk about engaging youth all the time. I think the previous slide was we work with, okay, let's do this. So the gardens are organized. There are basically 5 of us who work in this department. And with 56, now about to open our 57th garden this in a month and a half, we don't have the capacity to actually run and organize and run all of these gardens. Our role is to have a clean title, permanently protect the land, vouch for the soil. So usually when we build a new garden, it involves bringing in new, fresh topsoil and it's just soil that is safe for people to grow in and eat the food out of. A water supply, a good water supply, and some kind of fencing or security. So that's our role. We're also responsible for all the regular maintenance and capital improvements. Shoveling snow if it ever snows again in Boston. and making sure the water systems work and that kind of stuff. We're the interface with the city for any larger problems. And then the actual running of the garden is organized by one or a small group of coordinators from within the garden who are volunteers, probably not unlike a lot of community gardens everywhere. That's really where the power of volunteerism comes in for us. We could not, these places could not exist without everyone's help. The plots are the gardens, the plot you apply for a plot. We have an incredibly high demand, especially since the pandemic. Our plot requests numbers probably tripled starting in 2020 and haven't slowed down at all. From within the individual gardens, every spring there's a meeting, and they organize who the coordinators are going to be. Hopefully it's something that is inclusive and everyone can be a part of it. Clearly, everyone's always invited, but schedules can be tough. It's as collective as we possibly can make it. There are, and as long as somebody is in good standing, follows the rules, doesn't let their plot go to weed, and also participates in the community aspects of the garden space. So spring and fall cleanups, taking care of seasonal things, and also participating in the community events, participating in even organizing the events for the community-wide pieces. It's an annual tendency, and they have an opportunity every year to come back and renew their space. Spaces that become available either through people moving on or moving out or just losing interest. We have either a system of waiting lists that we keep, or some of the larger gardens, because the waiting lists are so long, have gone to a lottery system, giving everybody an equal shot every year. So where should we go from here? Some recent garden projects we have. Forgive me, this is an old PowerPoint that I borrowed before I headed off for a couple of days away. We have rebuilt the Winthrop Community Garden in Roxbury. It's been renovated and expanded. It's now got 30 plots. We do both grade level garden spaces and also raised beds. Part of what we are very mindful of is having everything be accessible for everybody, whether it be, we never want to the extent where folks can still garden, physical capabilities to be a barrier, and we never want finances to be a barrier. There are annual plot fees, but we are always willing to talk about that. And we are always, and the gardens themselves often have essentially a scholarship fund, so that nobody will be denied a space based on financial ability. So we've got this Winthrop garden was done, is about to open. We did the Windermere garden a couple of years ago, and we've just received a nice chunk of money, so that over the next 4 years, we'll be adding probably 3 or 4 more gardens. Again, 56 gardens, approximately 1,500 individual garden plots. We're looking probably at about, each of those has a family or housing unit attached to it. So we're probably looking at 5,000 people directly involved in the gardens. And then the sort of the ripple effect, the influence of the availability of the food and the community aspects of it is just, we guess, but we're probably guessing at about 10,000 people that these green spaces directly affect.
Oh, Peter, you gave a lot of great information about community gardens, and the fact that that you have 56 gardens right now, that's amazing. One question that came up as you were going through that was, we're talking statewide here. Trustees, I think you're kind of focused more on the Boston, greater Boston area. So if a community was looking to do this, or an individual is looking to kind of start a community garden in their general area, how would they go about doing that? What are some steps that they should take for really being able to create a community garden? Let's say in their neighborhood.
Thanks for starting with the small question.
Good.
So it depends upon where you are, clearly. That's so all of the successful sort of stewardship, neighborhood stewardship projects start with community members coming together and sort of declaring interest and sticking with it for a while. So if there's if we're talking Boston or sort of statewide, different parts of different parts of Massachusetts, different people own the dirt. So part number one is there community energy about doing this? Part number two is where's an available spot for this? And who owns the dirt? And to a certain extent, you need to worry about what the previous use of the land was. Now in Boston, everything that we grow in has been something. We have a block long garden with 159 plots that was a townhouse block in the old days, and because of the block was raised, and nothing, and we finally, and people started gardening, and we finally got it protected. But when you look at the maps and the subsurface information, there are still gas lines. All the utilities are still significant under this. But back to how do you start one? I think it's really just identifying the property and talking to the folks who own it is a really good first start. We are always happy to sort of chat with folks and provide advice about sort of next steps for things. In the city of Boston, there's offices changed, governmental offices names changed, but there has been for the last 30 years an office that disposed of vacant land in the city of Boston. And it was always a sort of is it going to be housing? Is it going to be gardening? Is it going to be something else? So that's where we have often looked to find new available spaces. We have some gardens at corporate sites. We work with Blue Cross Blue Shield, and we have community gardens for their folks on a couple of their campuses. We have there was in the south end, we had a garden on a block that had been vacant for many years. It was designated as housing. The contract was awarded, but part of the arrangement was that we got to see if I can do this coherently, condos, and then parking underneath. And so the deal that was brokered for us is that we now have a rooftop garden on top of the parking next to the condo tower. So there are all sorts of opportunities.
No, that's you just gave us some good items there. I think really what's the community insight, right? And it's a good place to start. Figure out where the community stands, or where your community stands. The second one was, who owns the land? I think that's always a big thing. That's a kind of a common sense question, but really a good question to ask. Who owns the land? Especially when you think about where you're looking to do this or where you're hoping to do it. As well as the other part to that was, what was previously done on the land. So you have an idea. Just curious on that. Are there ways for people to find out about previous use of land? Are there maps? I know you referenced a map, but is there something that people can access in their towns to find out what was previously used on land property?
It'll be a town by town thing, but in Boston you can look at old street maps
Gotcha.
There are archives for all of these things. Probably, hopefully, anything that was there had a building permit issued at some point.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely.
so there are records for pieces of land, and Boston in particular has a great assessing online service where you can start to see things. And again, a neighbor, an elected official, a neighborhood liaison folk. These people are all looking to be helpful. I lived in a neighborhood called Jamaica Plain many years ago, where and there was an elected official lived around the corner from us. It was not a great neighborhood. It had no street trees, and he called me one day and said, "Okay, we need to take a walk in the neighborhood." And we identified probably 50 spots where street trees could go in. 16 years later, I came walking down the street to my house, and the first tree had been planted. So these things can take time.
Yeah, that's actually an excellent reminder that this stuff takes time.
Yeah.
But also I think another good point there was talking to your elected officials, figure out where they are, kind of what's happening. Is that what that ring true?
Yeah. And also be mindful of who's up for re-election soon.
Yeah. Yes, that also
Because
makes sense.
AARP is not at all about that, right?
Not at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's the power of us as community members and voters that we can often get things done.
Yeah, definitely. Another question that I saw come in was around volunteerism. I know you mentioned the gardens, is looking for volunteers. That's kind of the how you keep these gardens going. How do folks go about volunteering, be it with you or any other community gardens that they may come across?
So our volunteers may come from within. People apply for a plot, and they can either do that directly through the garden, or we have something set up on our website where they can say, "Hey, I'm interested in a garden. Here's where I live. Here are 3 gardens that I would like to be considered for." And then our process is we connect them directly with the garden coordinator so they can have that conversation. And the garden, the heavy lifting volunteer work is coordinating a garden, because they deal with everything from compost deliveries to managing the waiting list, to keeping the gardeners happy, to keeping everybody informed about the season and requirements and obligations and celebrations, and even organizing all of that stuff. Some of these gardens work with just a sole coordinator, and I don't know why their heads don't explode. We've really found that a group of sort of 3 to 5 folks sharing, sort of collaborating and sharing that responsibility seems to work best. Anything less, it seems to be a burden on somebody, and anything more, it gets hard to start making decisions and actually acting on things.
Awesome. So collaboration is key for a lot of this.
Because let's remember that it's not only a garden, it's a community garden, so and when I first moved to Boston, it was during the busing and integration, and we I was hired to run garden and horticulture programs specifically for bringing school kids together who had previously lived on opposite sides of the fence, the tracks, whatever, who just had never spoken to each other. And as people were throwing bricks at school buses, in other corners of the neighborhood, folks were cutting through chain link fences and starting to build gardens. And I speak sort of specifically, my experience is the South End, where you had people who were in sort of fixed income subsidized housing, working side by side, people who were starting to move in and gentrify the neighborhood.
Mhm.
So, that it was really one of the few places where people were talking to each other and not yelling at each other
Yeah.
most of the time. Gardeners always have opinions.
Wow, Peter, this has been excellent. I think you've given a lot of great information around gardening. Any last words you want to say around gardening, the benefits of having community gardens in your neighborhood or community?
It's something that everybody loves. It's something that everybody can be proud of and be part of. Um, Fortunately or unfortunately, it improves the quality of life, and it also tends to improve the value of real estate, which is a real mixed blessing. You want to be able to do things so that folks who have built and lived and been and are the fabric of the neighborhood
Mhm.
can have these opportunities. But you also are looking over your shoulder to say, how is this going to change the neighborhood?
Yeah.
And is that going to be, for the better? But, people need food and people need green spaces.
There you go.
That's a quality of life thing.
I love it. That's a perfect soundbite right there. That's a perfect soundbite. Thank you so much, Peter. Really for sharing today. You provided some wonderful details for the many ways community gardens can really impact our communities and honestly our lives. So for more information about community gardens, please do visit arp.org/community gardens. I'll be putting a link in the chat here shortly for you to get to that. There's a wonderful guide that our national team just put together on creating community gardens. It's a great starting point. So please, I would suggest taking a look at that. Additionally, for more information about the trustees, it's www.trustees.org. You can always visit. Oh, I'm sorry. Please, Peter.
It's actually thetrustees.org. If you do trustees.org, you'll end up in Alaska. They got it first.
You're right. I have the trustees written down and I just read it wrong. So it's thetrustees.org. And you can always visit AARP's Livable Communities website to learn more about what we're doing in the age and dementia-friendly space here. It's arp.org/livable. You can learn a lot about what's happening nationally, as well as dive into a plethora of resources that really are assisting individuals and communities with further getting engaged and making them great places for people of all ages. For future events and activities happening directly here in Massachusetts, it's aarp.org/MA.